Um, so they go into the Holy Land, they take Jerusalem, sacking it and they killed and pillaged the people in there. And while I don't condone that, we also have to understand medieval warfare in general. It's generally understood if you resisted a siege, a full resist, because it was kind of like a game. I mean, they would be expected, whoever was in charge of the castle would be expected to hold out a little bit just to fulfill his obligations to his lord. But if they actually put up a really, big resistance, that they actually, basically if the invaders had to really earn the castle by actually sieging it and actually having to fight for it, it was pretty much expected that the defenders would be slaughtered. So this was no different. I mean, it would have been done against other Christians, it would have been done against Islam. That was medieval warfare. So when they take I think it was 1099 where they take Jerusalem, I think, if I recall correctly, they were expecting help from the Byzantine emperor, and he didn't really give them the support they wanted. So when they established the Crusader states, they decided not to be vassals of the Byzantine emperor, which I think was originally what they intended to do. So they ended up becoming independent states. So when you have that front, all right, let me regroup here. All right. Now, okay, so now you have these Christian invaders. I mean, they viewed it as former Christian lands, former Roman lands. Now you have these Christians here amongst all these Muslims. But it was never really a big deal to the Muslims. I mean, because we have to realize that the Muslims were not unified, okay? The Middle East was like a checkerboard of different players, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. And this is supported because there was times where the Kingdom of Jerusalem had allied with Damascus against a common enemy. So when the Christians came in, they're like, oh, well, we have us fighting amongst each other. Well, oh, who are these new guys? Oh, they're Christians. Okay, whatever. I mean, there was never really a solid front against the Christians at that time. And especially if you consider that the Crusader kingdoms were horribly outnumbered. Horribly outnumbered. I mean, if the Arabs in the Middle East had unified, they would have just kind of repelled them immediately. But that never happened because nobody trusted each other. It was just, just another thing. And the idea from even Muslims that the Crusades were a big deal and is actually a more modern invention. But God, I'm starting to ramble now. Let me try to get my focus. I need to get used to talking to a camera. So okay, let's switch over to the Iberian Peninsula, where the Spaniards and the Portuguese were fighting against Muslims from 711 to 1492. 1492 is an important year because what else is 1492? Right? 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? See, here's an important thing about the Spaniards at that time. When they were looking to make, trade routes to the Orient, they're looking to make money so they could support future military endeavors. Their actual goal was, now that they had the Iberian Peninsula, was to actually go in to North Africa and push back the Muslims there. And it wasn't just about the religious aspect. It was also, those were former Christian lands in North. They're former Roman lands. So I think there was a thing in Europe, they felt kind of an ownership of North Africa and the Latin East. So, I mean, they failed miserably at that, obviously, but to get into North Africa, but it definitely, we all know the history about that, the New World, so it definitely opened up things there. But the other, okay, and let's go back to the Latin East, the Holy Land. Conversion was never a goal. All right? I mean, let's get that straight. Conversion in the Holy Land was never a goal. They're never saying they're trying to forcibly convert Muslims. That wasn't their intent. They wanted to just reclaim land that they felt ownership of, or a right to. Now, you might say that's right or wrong, but it wasn't. My point is, it's not 100% religious warfare. I mean, it's very political. It's very cultural. In fact, there was a deal, I think it was Frederick II, he was the Holy Roman Emperor. He actually managed to swing a deal to actually get Jerusalem after Saladin had taken it. Now, it was kind of like in name only, because I think they couldn't garrison troops, or they had to tear down the walls of Jerusalem or something. But he did some little wheeling and dealing and actually got it. So it was never a big deal to the Muslims. That's only today. And that's our fault. Well, of Western society. See, Saladin was never a great hero to the Muslim world. For one, he was a Kurd, and they didn't like the Kurds. It was actually the Europeans who had honored and revered Saladin. They saw he was very chivalric. And I think it was recently, I think it was Kaiser Wilhelm I, he had visited the Middle East, and he had actually started praising Saladin. And I think what happened is that, he started invoking the Crusades, praising Saladin, and you see movies, so I think people are now attaching, grasping onto Saladin, but you have to keep in mind, like, what's going on today has nothing to do with the Crusades. I mean, Muslim scholars up until recently that might want to use the Crusades as propaganda, they said, they even said that the Crusades were just like a defensive action, it was no big deal. And there's other players in the Middle East, nothing, it wasn't that big of a deal. Let's see. And going back to the spread of let's talk about the spread of Christianity by the sword. Charlemagne had done it against what was it, the Germanic barbarians in the north of his realm. He was actually considered to be sainted, but the church said no, he couldn't be sainted because he had spread Christianity by the sword, and that was a big no-no. So yes, it did happen, but they do not condone that, right? So, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling now, so I guess I'll go ahead and end it there. Hopefully I didn't leave something out. So I apologize for, I need to get used to talking to this camera. I don't know, it's hard to look at because it reminds me of, it's like an evil little camera. It reminds me of Hal. It's just a big eye looking at me. But the point I want to get across is that the Crusades, it wasn't just like a religious fanatic assault. There was a political and cultural aspect to it. I mean, you had the idea in the minds of the Europeans of like the Roman Empire, restoring the Roman Empire. There were no nation states, so I think that the Christianity was like kind of like the culture that kind of was like a glue, and they identified with each other. Even someone in England could identify with someone living in Germany, right? I mean, there's that cultural bond. And so when an invader of a completely different culture comes in, it was a rally to push them back, and to keep going and reclaim what they thought they held ownership of. So I'll go ahead and end it here. I appreciate any comments or disagreements. I mean, I've left out so much. I mean, it's been a while since I've read about all this, so I'm probably forget a few things, forget a few points that I probably should have made. But I'll leave it at that, and Wilhelm out.